Before I became a professional gambler, my life was chaos. It's been a rollercoaster ride with massive highs and desperate lows. Because the truth is, I was forced along this crazy adventure with the odds stacked against me. If we wind back to 17, I was smoking 20 cigarettes a day, drinking excessively and flipping burgers in McDonald's for a living. I dropped out of education early and had been abusing substances for a few years. I had no direction in life and my only support network was a group of friends doing similar things. It was a bleak start. Living in a small, dead-end seaside town had limited options. But between getting in trouble with the law and sofa surfing, something happened. I had no money, living arrangements were a problem, and the situations I've been getting into were progressively getting worse. But things come to a head when I took ecstasy at work one day, fell out with a girlfriend, and found myself with nowhere to stay. The stakes were high, and it was the first time that I needed to accept my losses and quit chasing my mistakes. So I stopped smoking and joined the army.
Remember clinical judgment, making sure you get to the primary aiming points so you can eliminate that threat by smashing rounds straight into those primary killing areas.
Military training was like the older, wiser mentor that I'd never had before. I didn't want to be there initially, but I grew fond of the challenge, and in many respects the environment wasn't any tougher than I was already used to. I remember clashing with the directing staff on arrival. Undoubtedly, I had a bad attitude. They broke me down and built me up into a better version of myself through character building, as they would call it. After I passed the infamous P Company selection process, there was no going back. Just under 30% of my intake made it to the end, and I'd forged a lifelong bond with those who had been through it too. At this point, I'd never had any interest in gambling, although I believe this is a large part of what helped me become a professional gambler later on. But my service wasn't without its problems. In 2006, I deployed on the first wave to Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Politicians said that a shot wouldn't be fired during the time that I was there, but the first week proved that the reality was going to be very, very different. But the life-changing ordeal that pushed me towards gambling came later in 2008, an epiphany moment that would set me directly on the path to becoming a professional sports trader. After deploying to Afghanistan for the second time, I was presented with a unique opportunity. Within 48 hours of landing, my Sergeant Major approached me. He said he needed 2 volunteers for a specialist communications role, and he warned that it would be dangerous, but risk management wasn't yet on my mind, and I felt privileged to be offered the opportunity. So I spent the next 4 months with mercenary contractors burning poppy fields. Sending the district's main revenue stream up in a puff of smoke didn't go down well with the locals or the Taliban. Presumably, it's why the government didn't want an official military unit doing it. From start to finish, it was bonkers and exhilarating in the same breath. During this adventure, we only returned to camp once for resupply. These guys were extremely professional and totally mental at the same time. But like my military buddies, they were good, compassionate people. During that period, we took in an abandoned puppy that had not yet had its ears or tail cut off, something that happens to all the Afghan dogs. We named her Poppy after our work there. She later went on to live in a ranch in the United States. However, the darkest point came 3.5 months in as we drove through Nadi Ali into Marja, long before military forces had been there. We ended up dug in for 2 weeks solid. Fighting was fierce and it was hell. Woo! Day or night, the barrage never seemed to stop. One night it got so bad, there were serious concerns about being overrun, and I ended up talking to an Apache attack helicopter as an untrained observer. It was at this point the life-changing moment came. It was the lowest of the low, and I'll never forget it. I found myself slumped in the corner of this hole, helmet and body armour on, surrounded by the smell of burnt metal and charred camouflage net above my head, half covered in the dirt and rubble from the mound surrounding. The last serious strike had landed next to our trench. I found myself totally relaxed, motionless, and grasping a photo of my fiancée that I kept in my pocket. I'd reached this odd feeling of acceptance, waiting for the impending doom at any moment. There's no other way to describe it. Fortunately, despite several additional hours of shelling, that moment never came. Little Gaz and I celebrated with a cigarette in the darkness when it stopped. I could barely see him, but I remember it vividly. He thought it was absolutely hilarious as I'd become a devout fitness freak and didn't smoke. It was in those moments that I realised my life had to change direction again. On return, I was thinking about leaving the army for good. The Christmas previous, my girlfriend's grandfather had introduced me to betting on the horses. I didn't care for the sport much, but the prospect of making big money in a scalable way was appealing. I'd spend the next couple of years attempting to read the form and find winners as a mug punter. I used the old GG horse racing forum before they got rid of it, where I noticed a poster talking about Geek's toy betting software, which is where the money making journey started properly.
Okay, I trade on horse racing markets on Betfair. I basically look for price movements of the horse.
Around the same time, I see a video segment called Blag a Million, featuring a professional betting exchange trader that was making hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. My Betfair balance was around £7,000 negative at the time, but I was well and truly hooked. I sat up into the small hours on a regular basis, devouring every piece of information possible. I became obsessed. Failure just wasn't going to be an option. It was a frustrating period where I'd often take 2 steps forward and 3 back. Trust me when I say plenty of mistakes were made, although I was gradually making progress and had decided to leave the army after the best part of 8 years service. I'd met so many genuine blokes on the way, but risking death for crappy pay just wasn't a good trade, especially now I'd become a father for the first time. Several of my buddies had been less fortunate along the way. The last only urged me to leave sooner. But I could see the potential in gambling and wanted to start trading bets full time. It accelerated relationship problems at a time of uncertainty as I would be leaving the forces. Ultimately, it led to my darkest hour.
Carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, but don't let it make you older, they say.
A decade later, I was temporarily sofa surfing and skint once more. But I wasn't giving in. I'd been here before. With a lack of options and no formal education, I believed that I could beat the odds again. Newly divorced, I took a communications job whilst improving my gambling skills on the side. It wasn't a fun period, living in a state of financial crisis with adult responsibilities. I was determined to make it work. I quit drinking, stopped socialising, and structured my day so I could start work extra early and then, in turn, finish early so I could start trading bets on the afternoon's horse racing. Profits were low initially, but after a few months I was consistently making fair returns. It had become a reliable side hustle, and then the eureka moment came, a transformational moment where I suddenly realised the what and why behind my limited success.
Let me be made fearless in faith.
I remember reading The Snowball, a book about Warren Buffett's life, shortly before a horse racing commentator started ranting about why bookmakers had changed their prices. The missing piece clicked and my perception changed. I stopped thinking about form, trainers and all the other guff that bookies promote and zeroed in on understanding fear, money patterns, time frames and finding value. Anticipating and acting on developing changes was key. After filtering through my past results, a few distinct patterns started to emerge. So I doubled down on the profitable situations and completely binned off anything that wasn't working. Betting profits soared, compounded by my highly focused and disciplined routine. At this point, the decision to go full-time was nerve-wracking but obvious. I was earning far more in a couple of hours trading betting odds than an entire morning's work. After saving up for 6 months of living expenses, I took the leap. The first month was a total flop. I recall making just £4,500 profit, a lower figure than I had been accumulating from previous months part-time. The psychological pressure of needing to perform was tense. Although results grew rapidly by the 3rd or 4th month, it didn't take long before I was working less, spending more, partying excessively and taking holidays regularly. It went to my head a little bit at times and I developed a habit of finishing early to sit in the beer garden on an afternoon. Accumulating what would have previously been a year's salary in a little over a month was quite overwhelming to say the least. Having a lot of extra money brought a new round of challenges. I didn't know what to do with it. People around me began to notice the sudden change too, but they weren't alone because Betfair reached out to me in 2014 wanting to use me for their marketing drive.
Hi, my name's Caan and I trade Betfair for a living. This morning I've had a quick scan through the race cards and I've found a free horse race. Now in this free horse race there's likely to be an opportunity that I can exploit, and now I'm going to show you how I do that.
This period was a lesson for me as I did their marketing videos totally unpaid and realised who my true friends were. Later in 2019, when Betfair sponsored me and a couple of other pro traders, I didn't make that same mistake. I've grown a lot along the way, but 10 years of betting full time has given me and my children the life I once dreamed of. I'm truly grateful. Take a look at my daily routine in this video here, and don't forget to subscribe down below if you enjoyed this video. Thanks, I'll see you next time.